Public Affairs Forum of WZTV Fox 17. And now your host, Dr. James Haney.
Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is mentoring the African-American male. And we're fortunate to have with us two persons to talk about the African-American male and the whole process of mentoring. Mr. Sidney Wingfield. And Mr. Wingfield is the author of Positive African-American Men United, a book that he has with us this morning that we'll have an opportunity to talk about. And of course, with Mr. Wingfield is Reverend Daniel Hayes. Reverend Hayes is the pastor of John Wesley United Methodist Church here in Nashville. And gentlemen, let me welcome both of you to the show this morning to talk about this very, very important topic of mentoring the African-American male. Mr. Wingfield, before we get into the book that you have with us this morning and to talk about some of the problems dealing with mentoring the African-American male, let's have you and later Pastor Hayes to give us some information about your background and your education and some of the things that were important in terms of leading you to where you are now.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. First of all, I'd like to tell you that, and it's a pleasure to be here with you too, Pastor. Basically speaking, let me just give you a little bit of insight. Right now I work for Juvenile Court of Davidson County. I've been doing that for 10 years, working with young people. And I've worked in the social work field for the past 25 years. I've also been researching solutions to the problems that the African-American population were going to be facing at that time and what I perceived it was going to eventually get to. I kind of had a head start in my area of social work. I have a master's degree in social work from the University of Tennessee and attended Scarrett College for Christian Workers, a United Methodist College, by the way. I grew up in Chicago and was given up at birth. And went into foster care at that time and grew up in foster care in Chicago. And the people that raised me were loving folks, foster parents, ministers, teachers, policemen, drill sergeants, you name it, people from the community who put a lot into me to try and make me turn out to be something. And hopefully, those things which are good, I want to give them credit for, and of course my shortcomings, I'm going to take full responsibility for those. But I know from my own experiences that every child out there has potential, and every child out there has a God-given talent and ability that if discovered and developed, will allow that child to earn an honest living when they become an adult. And this was one of the primary forces behind the drive to do the research, and not just academic research, but put this into a language which everybody could understand, and also not conflict as far as the divisions that we have along religious, social, economic, and political lines.
Very good.
It needed to be something that crossed those lines.
Very good. And let me have the same kind of information from you, Pastor Hayes, in reference to your background, and then we'll get into this whole question of mentoring the African-American male.
Basically, I grew up in North Nashville. Had an opportunity to go to some of the fine public institutions, graduated from Pearl High, Tennessee State University, attended Vanderbilt, and graduated from Gammon Theological Seminary in Atlanta, Georgia, with a Master's of Divinity. Had an opportunity for 17 years to coach Little League Baseball at the North Nashville Athletic Association, to coach Little League Football for the Bartow YMCA. Had an opportunity to coach basketball for Gordon Memorial United Methodist Church in the athletic department there. So had an opportunity to be involved with young men just about most of my life, and I found that this is very inspirational to them, and to be able to work with the other coaches and other people who are involved in them, find that it is extremely important that they have someone to look up to and to lead them on their journey in life.
Very good. And I think both of you represent a very, very important element in terms of trying to deal with this whole question of mentoring the African-American male. Mr. Wingfield, let's have you to give us some information relative to the whole process of mentoring. I think one of the things that you've indicated in your book, you've called it the Positive African-American Men United. Exactly what do you mean by that, Positive African-American Men United?
Positive African-American Men United for our women, our children, and our elders. One of the primary responsibilities that all men have across cultures is a responsibility for the care and protection of those folks who are weaker and more vulnerable than themselves. And fatherhood is a responsibility that cannot be delegated. The situation that exists right now with the African-American community is a national problem. And what I strive to do was to come up with win-win solutions for African Americans and all of America. This is was the intent, that we come up with something that benefited everybody. And as I did my examination and research, what I had found that had taken place, and this directly reflects to mentoring, is the African American community had taken something for granted during the civil rights struggle that did not come into existence. We had assumed that once we received full rights under the law, that we would assimilate into mainstream America and be treated just like ordinary citizens. We did not perceive the other challenges that lay ahead of us today. And therefore, we did not have a strategy to deal with those challenges, and we have become victims of institutionalized racism, victims of drugs, victims of school dropout. And the new challenge that was ahead for us, not as a separate group of people, but as a culture, defining African-American culture. This is a very, very important time in history for us. We are the most fortunate people in the world in that we have an opportunity to establish our standards and rules for our culture based on the positive history of the entire world. No other group of people have ever had this opportunity before. And this is what was done in this book. Basically, it begins with a unity prayer, in that if we cannot be united in at least praying together, there's not going to be any success in an economic or political initiative. We know this.
Very good. And I think, Pastor Hayes, that allows us an opportunity to perhaps bring something in reference to prayer here. He talked about the importance of prayer, the importance of the Christian experience, or importance of the religious, spiritual experience, rather than. What can perhaps you say in terms of that experience this morning that might help us out in terms of what we're trying to do?
One thing I feel that we need to do is to put a call on all African-American males to become involved in church. And to build a strong foundation for themselves and for our kids, for our families. I think that Dr. Wingfield is definitely on the right track and saying what he's and doing what he's doing. And the book will definitely, I think, enhance all African American males to a positive point of view. Prayer is the key. We must become united in prayer. And definitely, I think that the foundation of prayer is the church.
Very good.
Okay, and then after we establish the fact that we have to begin at the beginning with our spirituality and prayer, second is a cultural standard. African Americans we've been in the struggle for freedom and equal rights for so long that we can tell everybody what we're against, but we're not united in what we stand for. And this is what the book does. My research all the way back through our people, Africa and Europe, came up with what our people have always stood for, and that is, one, to raise children who are healthy, polite, well-mannered, and reflect home training in their attitude and behavior. Two, to train these children and help them to all make honorable, and I'm using the word honorable, contributions to themselves and the world. And then last of all, to encourage, train, and support our young people in relating to each other in the home as ladies and gentlemen. And I think that all of us can agree on that across all lines and across racial lines too, that this is something that's positive for African Americans. And the only thing that this book does is give you a place to begin. It's also subtitled A Cultural Revolution. And by that, I mean, basically, the problem is so big that we cannot look at it as a program. It has to be something that crosses the entire culture, that regardless of what your religion, denomination is, you say that I had you, I'm your father, I'm your parent, I'm your school teacher, I'm the policeman, I'm the gym teacher, and part of your responsibility as a young man is to be healthy, polite, and well-mannered. And one more thing, now I'm gonna let you go on. The other thing is to at least establish a working definition of manhood. We ask our boys to be men, but yet and still we don't have a working definition of manhood to give them, and that's not fair. And this is where a lot of the frustration and anger is coming out, because the elders, which I am one of the race group, are responsible to come up with a working definition of manhood. That's also in the book, and it's based on, and the dividing line between manhood is very clear. It's based on not anything macho or hurting or strength, but based on your relationship to your spirituality as the guideline, and how that relationship reflects in your responsibility and your duty to your family and your community.
You know, I think